Yeah, we originally had scheduled the release for the third, I believe, and so we're just gonna that release that was gonna happen on the third. We're just gonna cut it on the 30th. Yeah, nothing specific for the status section. I think we have a couple demos, and we're going to be talking about some of the stuff in the current sprint. So kind of rolled into the rest of the discussion. I mean, I think it's a good call out. I think that the we've talked about this before in past meetings, and it's something that I think it's important to reiterate that there is a goal to have three clear lanes of documentation: user documentation on octant.dev, plugin author documentation on reference.octant.dev, and then core Octant documentation for engineers looking to extend Octant in the GitHub repo. So those are the three kind of lanes of documentation, and I just want to make sure that that when we're talking about these things, that the work that we're looking at aligns with the work that you are wanting to have done, David, and like the work that we need to do. So um, I don't think that it is the I don't think that this documentation is geared for the user. I think the stuff that the Luis is currently working on is geared towards the engineer, and he can confirm or speak to that. But I think that might be the confusion point with this.
I think it's a great goal to have to improve documentation, across the 3 swim lanes and all of that. My concern is that these don't necessarily align directly with our new way of releasing, and that we're trying to stick with the theme of object status for this particular release. And so within those goals, like, yes, we could shoehorn this one into Kubernetes updates subscription, and documenting that, but that's also still kind of a large area. And so, one is the concern that the questions that you'll be asking of the maintainers team pulls them off of away from the context in which they're trying to stay for this release. So, so this release is a pilot program, essentially. So we're doing a test run. And so, if someone has to be pulled off in order to do a lot of work around architecture discussions around this, I don't know how much that impacts their velocity. And that, I guess that's one of my concerns, and also just how detailed this documentation is going to be, and how useful it's going to be, and whether or not we should spend some time kind of going through these 4 major areas and whether they can be pared down a little bit. The scope can be updated to something that's more manageable, but that's also something that should be done kind of with the engineering team.
Yeah, I also want to say I think that you have an excellent point, David, and I would love for the entire team to at one point set a theme of documentation, right? Like as a team, we spend a full 2-week period dedicated to improving our docs, using our docs, getting with end users and sitting there while they use our docs, and like doing all of the things that that need to be doing all the things that help make great documentation. And so I want, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think the continued effort that you're making, like the green items that you have that you can kind of complete on your own, love to see those happening. And also you are part of our team. You're one of the maintainers. Documentation is a core piece, and managing community is a core piece of an open source project. And we're so happy that you're here. So I just want to say that. The stuff that's in orange that might need help from the team, I would say make sure that there's already an upstream issue for it. We have a documentation project in GitHub, and if there is not, create one. And if there is, feel free to manage and organize that documentation project in whatever way helps you and helps you organize the work. And you could even create your own columns in there of like needs engineering versus like I can do myself. And then when we go to, with the current theme approach we're taking, if the team ultimately decides we like it and it works, we'll, regardless of if it does work or not, we will have a documentation themed sprint. Like there will be a sprint dedicated to that. So, and we can work to like firm up a date too, instead of just saying like we will do it. We can put some concrete dates on it and say like, talk about it and decide, 5 sprints from now or whatever, 4 sprints from now, whatever it is.
Yeah, agreed. I think there should be a full push towards supporting, our plugin authors, our users, all of that. And they're definitely, I think there are open issues for some of those items right now.
Yeah, and I would say for me, order of importance is users, then plugin authors, and then like us as the engineering team, we're last. We're the ones who have to deal with and feel the pain. But like our users and our plugin authors should not. So that's also how I would prioritize things generally around documentation.
Yeah, I just wanted to also add, I mean, kind of same note. I think this is really, I just wanted to stress the importance of this, because in a lot of things, I mean, we know that a lot of people don't care, but there's on the other side, a bunch of people that do care about documentation. And in a lot of times, this is like make it or break it for adoption. For example, this morning I was playing with a Go library and documentation is terrible. And I'm like, do I really need to use this? This is so hard. So, you know, I think we have a lot of things here and there, and just to merge them together, organize it better, and make it more targeted towards all the special kinds of users, that would be amazing.
Hello, sound check. All right, sounds good. Okay, so I wrote this as an intro simply because this is a feature that even though despite being on a major team, I haven't really had to think about it until the last couple of weeks. And then even further back, it's been broken for probably at least 6 months now. And so this has been undiscovered. So I did a little bit of digging, and it turns out we did document this at some point. So the interesting piece here is more of just reinstating this and just doing a quick intro. So it's more transparent on what I'm even talking about in the first place. So I will share a screen if you don't mind, David. All right, here we go. So this is our reference.octant.dev, and this is under plugins, Go plugins, and where we document this piece of our public API that is known as an object status response. And here it says it currently maps to pod summary and contains a list of details, node status. And this is old, actually, because it's been further expanded and changed around a little bit. And in fact, this doesn't exist anymore. So this is, to David's point, we need to not only write new documentation, but our existing documentation is already outdated. But what this is really saying in a more high level, and the easiest way to talk about this is just to show what Octant is doing. And this has changed a little bit since the code was originally written. But if we look at this object status response, we can see it consists of mainly 3 things: this status, something called details, which is a bunch of subcomponents, and this thing also known as a property, which we can talk about in a second, but it's just really key pair values of components. And so Octant has this thing called an object status, and it's really just whether something shows up as green, yellow, or red, depending on the state of the object. And we use the status in multiple places, notably in this resource viewer, but also if we just look it up in general, we have these check marks on our tables that have the green color, and it also shows certain things. Well, normally I would show the change, but I broke the build. I did the cardinal sin of changing your code right before a demo. That being said, it's not too difficult to show what's going on here. So the node status, if you have a plugin, you could say this is, say, for example, node status OK. All of these are currently in the state of node status OK, and that's internally determined by Octant. But one could, in a plugin, make a given pod red for reasons, right? You could say, like, I'm waiting for this pod that represents a database to start up first, or I want to make sure if, for example, maybe someone didn't apply their liveliness probes and they want to still have a plugin to check this, they would be able to do that. So that is how we can have a plugin theoretically change this color on a resource viewer or on a table. Now we also have the other 2 pieces, which are details and properties. And these are a little bit more interesting. The properties tab is something that can be shown more in the resource viewer. I have an example that's pulled up already, and I also have some JSON pulled up to show what's going on here. Where is the example here? Yeah, so we have our pod and we've got some properties. So I don't know if this is very visible on the screen here, but here we can see we have 6 properties under this cert manager pod. And the easiest way to think about properties is just a key pair value. So this is a key. This is a namespace key, and it says this is a cert manager. This is created key, and this is created 28 days ago. And then this is a link component. And what we've added from the plugin is saying, oh, this is the ID. So this piece of information comes from a plugin and not Octant. And here's some plugin specific information. And so one could arbitrarily keep adding new things here through a plugin. And we also have another piece in details, clicking up here, that says, oh, V1 service account is okay. And we can see here something like pod is okay, but you could also continue to extend this piece, going back to this details. It's essentially an array of components. So you could add any number of arbitrary things, and it would just keep piling up in this box here, saying it's okay, or maybe you want to add a note or saying like, oh, this, remember to delete this, or hello world, or you can say hi to your friends, and so on and so forth. So this shows up on this part of the resource viewer. And it also shows up, in theory, on these checkboxes when you click on them. So these could technically grow arbitrarily large. So this might be something we want to think about from a UX perspective. But that's really it about this object status. We want to just make sure this feature comes back and make sure that it's transparent on how to use it and when one would use it. So that's about it. No color changes today, but I think it's fairly straightforward to talk about. Really, the code here is to figure out how to reconcile some of the code changes, and we've just changed a lot of this over time. And I believe if when this was originally written, we didn't have these object status indicators on tables. So really, it's just about saying let's have a single source of truth for what is the status within Octant's internals, and making sure that they're being overridden in a sensible way. So that's it. Any questions about object status responses and plugins?
Thank you so much for that overview. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Felipe, if you have a question.
Yeah, my question was that, is the object status related with the phase or with the state of the object?
Okay, so state could mean a lot of different things, but currently right now, these statuses are a result of the phase. And the state could really just mean anything, right? So this is what this is what the point of this object response is, right? You could write arbitrary code to change this to say, instead of having this color being dependent on phase, now it's anything you want it to be.
Makes sense. Thank you.
My question is just around when you hovered over pods, the tooltip that popped up was blank for the status. And I did a quick search on the issues and didn't see it, but I could just be searching on the wrong keywords. Does anyone know if we have an open issue for that?
No, but it'll get wrapped over pretty much as I go through this already. This is fixed on the dev build. I'm using
awesome.
the latest Octant.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. I think that's great overview. And I think one good point that you made, and I kind of want to expand on it, is we have those components around in different places. Like you mentioned, the status, we use it both in resource viewer and tables. But I think we need to think a little more atomic way of using them. So they can be used on multiple places. For example, like properties table, this is currently in the resource viewer the only place we use them, but there's no reason we shouldn't be able to use that on some other pages as well. So we need to think a little more about how we display properties in different places. No, sorry, not properties. The whole status thing in different places. Make sure it's uniform. Make sure it's we show the same information in current context and in the same way. So maybe we need to do a little more work about, so for properties table, I don't think that's a component now. I don't think, when I created that, it's just a table I'm adding there, but it may need to be extracted and reused in some other places.
Yeah, I agree. That definitely, we don't want these to be just a standalone table that just lives off here. I don't know where else it would go off the top of my head, but if you have thoughts on it, give me a ping and we can talk about it. Cool. Well, that's it. I think we can move on if there are no additional questions.
Yeah, let me pull that up, and let's see here, make it a little easier. All right. Can y'all see that okay? Or maybe I'll embiggen one.
Yeah, it's a little small.
Okay, so this demo is a little well, like everything kind of looks the same, but it's there's some neat stuff happening here. So this conditions table that's being rendered on the screen here is no longer type specific, and it's only rendered if conditions are present for the object. Following kind of the similar pattern of events, where if events are enabled and they're present, or sorry, if events are enabled, then we'll render a table for them. This is a similar idea. If an object has a conditions field, whether or not they're empty doesn't matter. If it has that status conditions field, then we will render this table. And in particular, this table is now rendered using an unstructured object, so it's not typed. What this means is that this create conditions view, which produces the table, can now be used with any object within Octant that has that status conditions field. We have to jump through a few bit of extra hoops here. I'm also using some of the, like you can see on my timestamp, right? I'm still using a text field, even though we have a timestamp field. But this is all live running against the API. So it parses, it uses these libraries out of the unstructured package to parse out the nested status map. It grabs the slice of conditions, then we iterate through them, and because of the way that Kubernetes objects are marshaled and unmarshaled, most of the fields are omitted when they're not present. So if a condition has no reason or no message, it'll be omitted. So we have to check and verify that the key actually existed before we attempt to try and access that data. But yeah. So there's two open issues. The one that I'm currently working on is adding changing the conditions table and adding it to something. I don't remember what. Anyway, what is it? I'm trying to find the issue. Anyway, the issue is I am making it so that this table is flexible, similar to events. And then there's a follow-up issue for this, which will now be able to start to render conditions for any object easily now, because it takes an unstructured type. So we convert our type, in the case of like a custom resource, convert it to unstructured, pass it to this helper method, and we'll get back a conditions table with its conditions. So now that'll be present. Once that issue's done, conditions will be present on CRD summaries, which is just another way to make them a little bit more useful. Right now, CRD summaries are pretty. Let's see. They're pretty not great. There. As you can see, there's not much happening there. So this will now have a conditions table, which will be useful. Yeah. Anyway, that's the full thing. That's it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Any questions around this?
I think another interesting thing just to note is that there is an issue in our backlog for converting printers to be non-typed, to be unstructured. And this is kind of an example of starting that process. Obviously, it's only for one, but events is another example of that. And I think it's just something to keep in mind as we start to do more of these. There'll kind of be a natural tipping point where the investment is better to just go ahead and do it across the system than it is to keep doing them individually.
Thank you so much. Cool. Okay. Now last one was an open question in this issue 2666. She's basically here. You know, clarification on the version support, Kubernetes version support on Octant. So this is what the actual documentation says. So I don't know if what could we say regarding this question? Is there anything to improve there or to clarify there?
Yeah, I feel like it's self-explanatory. I think so. I'll say what I think he thinks and what I think our documentation says, and then we can decide if it's clear or not. So Octant is using the last 3 versions from the version of the Kubernetes client it uses. So currently uses 1.19, so it takes the last 3 versions.
Okay.
Now, I think he's saying Octant should be covering the last 3 versions based on the current version of Client Go that's released, which would imply that we are much more than 3 versions behind. And so really the question is at its core is when do we bump our Kubernetes client? And historically, we don't really have any strong governance around that. I think we've done it just based on if we needed something from the upstream resolved, which we do. We do have one particular issue with the IAM authenticator that does have an upstream fix patched already, so we could certainly bump based on that reason. That said as well, I do want to see our next bump to be somewhere around 122 because that just makes all of the deprecated Kubernetes objects go away and we would never talk about them again and close like 10 issues. But that also has further discussions around like the ecosystem in general, because pretty much everyone on Twitter is saying things people are totally going to break as soon as they upgrade because nobody who reads patch notes, right? So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. We could do a small bump to get that patch in, or we could do a big one to just skip a few steps.
Yeah, I think the points that Sam made here are great. Reading this, I think the fact that we have Octant versions in there alongside of the Kubernetes client versions makes it a little confusing, right? Like it shouldn't. The version of Octant, maybe we want to start to publish what Kubernetes client a version of Octant has been built with, so that it is easy, or even publish in the release notes that this version of Octant is considered to be compatible with, and then it's the client Go we built with -1 +1. So I think maybe that's what's causing the confusion here. Because I'm inferring that from the should there be 3 active Octant release branches, which is that to me shows that there's some confusion about what we mean when we say we follow a n ±1 policy. The interesting piece of this is that this language was like cargo culted directly from the Kubernetes website. We just changed some of the words to say Octant instead. So it was like using their language. But yeah, I think I'm fine to update the docs for it and then add we can add a little bit of to our tooling that generates like our release notes. We could add a go look in, grep our go mod file and determine what the client go version is that we're using, so that we can automatically inject that into the release notes, so that someone doesn't have to manually do it or something. I don't know. That's my idea. As for when should we bump, that's a different question. So I'll pause for a second to see if anyone wants to add anything about our support matrix for client Go and Kubernetes clusters, and then I'd like to talk about when we should upgrade.
I think it might be interesting to increase visibility of this, maybe even add it to, I don't know, about when we show the Octant version, maybe you can say, built with client version X and supports Kubernetes versions, I don't know, from 119 to 21. So just to kind of help users, although not many people look at that, at least we have a place to point where that information is.
Actually, yeah, that's not a bad idea. And having that as part of the, because then it would be, one of the things we ask for when someone creates an issue is the version of Kubernetes they're running. If we can make a nice little snippet, like click here to create an issue in Octant that automatically populates the version of Octant and the client it was built with, and
yes,
maybe even if we can. This is long reaching, but like maybe even no, we can't do that. We can't put their cluster info, even the version, without their consent. So but our Kubernetes client and the client Go it was built with, and then when they add the version of Kubernetes they're running, we can instantly see like, oh, hey, you're upgrade. like not a bug.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's enough to build an answer for the user.
And then for the other question of that Sam brought up, which is like, when do we upgrade? I think that we're definitely behind right now. What my plan to make this policy easy for us to adhere to was to be essentially -1 from the current Kubernetes release, because their support structure for client Go is the same as that. So if we were on 121, then we know Octant is going to technically work with 120, 121, and 122. That said, the 122 update is likely going to like, I'm almost wanting to just go ahead and move Octant to 122 and see what kind of errors and things fall out of it, and then potentially see if we can make it useful for folks who are going to be upgrading to 122, because there are some convenience features of like, there's like some things you can do to auto migrate some of the resources and update the resource versions. So we might be able to include some remediation for people who update their version and haven't updated their resources if we were running on 122.
That'd be kind of hilarious. Like unless Octant runs on your cluster, you haven't sufficiently upgraded your resources yet.
Yeah. Hopefully we could like gracefully degrade and be like, here's all the resources that you need to upgrade. But probably that would be a challenge. Anyway, I am on board with moving to 122 for the next release.
So sooner rather than later. So not in 0.23, but 0.24.
Yes, and not for this one that we're going to cut now. Though, what are we on now? That's a better question, because if we're not at least on 120, we're going to have to update anyway. Does anyone know off the top of their head?
Definitely 19.3.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so we're behind.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think I think for this release, moving to 121 is a minimum. We can handle that. I guess we can have a discussion about moving to 122.
It's a big jump. But you know, if it's not hard to do, why not?
Yeah, well, so far I will just try to answer the user's question. I wasn't
Okay.
prompting an upgrade on a Kubernetes version, but yeah, probably we will need to discuss that. And that's interesting. Thank you so much. Okay, any other items, topics someone would like to discuss? No? Okay, well, thank you so much, team. Have a nice day.